Welcome to Good for Bitcoin, a weekly show recorded live every Friday, where we recap the top events of the week and talk about everything that is good for Bitcoin. If it's built on Bitcoin, then it's good for Bitcoin. Let's get started.
Content shared on this podcast is for informational and entertainment purposes only. It does not constitute financial, investment, or legal advice. The views and opinions expressed are those of the host and guests and do not reflect the official policy or position of any other agency, organization, or company. We encourage you to conduct your own research and consult with a qualified professional before making any financial decisions.
All right. Thanks, everybody, for joining us. Excited to get this show started today. Trying to bring Rena up. I'm inviting to speak, but might have to go grab my other device really quick to see if she can join there if she's having some trouble. But welcome to the Good for Bitcoin show. Really excited to again have everybody joining us today. Really wanted to, we tested this out last week, and we're trying to do this every week, every Friday, just as sort of like a end of week kind of hangout style show, and really just trying to talk about the news on Bitcoin for the week. The idea is that if it's built on Bitcoin, then it's good for Bitcoin. So we want to be a little bit wider ranging in what we talk about. And Rena, I can see that you just joined. So hi.
Hi, where are we starting with today or this week's Bitcoin news? And if you don't have one, can we just say Craig Wright is not Satoshi officially?
I mean, we all knew that, right? But it is really nice to have that validation in the courts. And I have some thoughts. Maybe seems like you're fired up, Rena, and you want to talk about that. So maybe you could expand on your thoughts a little bit more.
I think a lot of people don't know that it was purposely brought to court in the UK about Craig Wright to not be Satoshi by a group of Bitcoin evangelists who felt like Craig Wright was diluting the brand of Bitcoin, and it pissed them off so much that they decided to take legal action to affirm that he is not Satoshi, which just blows my mind.
Yeah, I mean, he was kind of using the legal system in a way that like a lot of like patent trolls do, right? Where he was using it sort of as a form of intimidation. I can't recall like specific cases, but I remember hearing about him being hostile to like certain Bitcoin developers and stuff like that. So yeah, I mean, it wasn't just the fact that he was out there just like claiming to be Satoshi. He was doing actual harm to legitimate Bitcoin developers and like people that are just trying to build on Bitcoin and trying to grow. And so yeah, it's great to to have that validation. But has he like made a statement or anything after the fact?
No, I think he's laying low that he feels like he's gonna try one more time because that dude does not quit.
Yeah, I mean that's what we get in this industry, right? We have all these grifters out here that we have not purged all of them yet, and that's what's holding us back a little bit.
Bring on the purge.
Yeah, I agree. Shaylee, I'm trying to bring you on. I don't know if you're having trouble as well, but and if anybody has anything else that they'd like to contribute, feel free to request to come up. Happy to talk about whatever is on you guys' mind. I wanted to talk about, we've had a lot of product news on the Trust Machine side this week. So I wanted to kind of dive into just a few things to talk about that. For one, on the leather side, we released a pretty big update. There was some bug fixes. I know there was one thing that I saw requested from a bunch of people because, especially with all the meme coins and stuff that has been coming out, it used to not be a big deal that you couldn't send like 1 million or 1 billion stacks to somebody, right? Because the average person doesn't usually need to do that. But with all these meme coins now, with these huge denominations, there was like a limit on like how many you could send in one transaction on Leather. So we basically just removed that limit. So now you can send a billion like Fox coins to somebody if you want to, and that works out great.
How many tokens is too many tokens? How many foxes?
Well, I've accumulated. I feel like all the animals on on my Leather wallet these days from not even doing anything. I don't. They find me somehow. Maybe it's because I have a BNS address or something. But yeah, I've gotten a few random airdrops, and I mean, realistically, most of these are probably not going to be anything. But you never know, right? I mean, I feel like they're worth hanging on to just in case.
I mean, I can only go so far with so many farm animals. Not gonna lie, I'm not gonna make it.
Well, what's the next meta, Rena? We're moving past animals, and what are we gonna go to next in terms of meme coin topics?
Ooh, I like this. Okay, so we started off in the food era. So the sushi era is where we started.
Mm,
No, I take it back. We started off on the domestic pet era for Doge and such. So we started off on dogs.
yep, yep.
Then went to the food era. Does anyone remember like yam? Yam was a token. We had pancakes and sushi and burgers and oh god, our industry really sucks. Okay, so then we went on to food. Now we've come back to the farm animal and animals with accessories, i.e., dog with hat.
Right.
Mm,
We have the used Honda Civic.
I mean, I own used Honda Civic. I'm not gonna lie. I have spent too much time on the Solana memes.
Okay.
Um, Plants. I'm calling it.
Oh, okay.
We're gonna need something that grounds us. So I'm waiting for willow and oak tree
Ooh,
and the entire grounding element.
I like that. I like yeah, the going into more of the earthly elemental vibes. I can get behind that for sure.
You know what? It's gonna be
Okay,
like Earth,
wait. Did
Wind,
we talk
Fire.
about insects? Because I see on the Gamma, the Gamma.io website has like Lord of the Flies, and they have this fly that's like wings are flapping, and then there's eighth copy as well with that looks like an insect. So this might be a new trend as well. Insects.
I am seeing what there. Yeah, there are multiple flies that they are, and there's a frog, which
I've
is
seen a lot
a
of
little
frogs.
insect adjacent.
Yeah. I think frogs have been in for a long time.
I mean, we have Pepe, so I mean,
Yeah.
of course, that goes way
Pepe
back.
is the original gangsta frog.
We have to honor. Yeah, we respect Pepe, respect the pump. Um, so yeah, so that's interesting. So welcome, Shaylee. Sorry, we didn't even say hi.
Oh,
You just jumped
sorry.
right in.
Hi.
No, I didn't
What
say hi.
what
I'm not saying you
category
didn't
would
say hi. I
puppets?
didn't say hi.
Hi everyone, I'm Shaylee. I work at Trust Machines. What category would puppets fall into?
Ooh, well, you can have a puppet of anything, right? You could have
True.
insect puppets. You could do some derivative style collections there. So,
Yeah, but I like Rena's thesis on like stones and or just earthly
well,
things.
funny that you should mention stones because I mean that has definitely been very trending lately in terms of runes and
Yes.
stone-based memes. So, yeah, there's definitely something to that for sure. Yeah, we've definitely been leaning a little bit more heavily into the runestone stuff. That I think the whole airdrop runestone, all this stuff has been really interesting. I don't know if you've been following kind of some of the stuff that's been happening sort of post runestone airdrop, but a lot of holders of runestones are now being sort of targeted for additional airdrops, and it's almost like by holding a runestone, it's almost like a golden ticket to like additional airdrops, which is very interesting.
Do you mind, Brandon, giving a TLDR of what a runestone is? Because I'm not sure if everyone knows what a runestone is, like that standard.
Yeah, I mean, well, it's not really a standard, but it's basically just a really big airdrop, and the idea was kind of conceived by Leonidas from Ord.io, who most of us should be familiar with, also on the Bitcoin show. And it really was designed to be like the largest airdrop on Bitcoin. So over 100,000 people were picked essentially to to receive it, and it was based on just a really simple criteria, which was you had to have owned at least three inscriptions in a wallet, that are like not text-based inscriptions. So that they had to be like some type of art, or you know HTML, or something that was like beyond like a BRC20 like transfer inscription. Um, so over 100,000 people were on that list, and they didn't have to do anything. There was nothing that you had to do in terms of going to a website to claim it or anything. It was just, if you were on the list, you got sent one, whether you like it or not. And it was funded by the community. There was a ton of different groups and other inscription projects that funded it, because it was, that's to send inscriptions to over 100,000 people is very expensive. So it was funded by the community, and it's really just it's kind of taken up a life of its own. And there's been a lot of other NFT projects now, and ordinals projects that are sort of doing their own derivatives on it. We posted on the Leather account that the Pizza Ninjas have done some stuff with it. There's BTC Machine has done some stuff with it. There's a ton of other projects that are doing stuff with it now. So it's it's been pretty cool. And the value of them is crazy. The floor price is like 0.05 Bitcoin right now, I think, which is like thousands of dollars. So everybody got, like 100,000 people got this really valuable thing for free, which is pretty amazing.
Where do you think kind of the next iteration of runestones is going to go?
Well,
Like we're getting to mainnet in a couple weeks, and then does it open the floodgates? Do we think people are going to use this more than, let's say, BRC20s?
I mean, yeah, so that's a good point. And actually, I didn't even really explain the runes, sort of the connection with runes, because it was probably a couple months ago now, that the kind of the first big project to kind of do something like this was RSIC, and that team over there. And basically, they did a similar thing where they airdropped a bunch of these inscriptions to. It was kind of determined that they favored like holders of certain collections, and holders of certain collections were basically picked to receive this airdrop. So I mean, there's nothing really wrong with that necessarily, but the runestone sort of idea came about to have essentially a more fair version of that. So it was designed to just credit everybody, whether you held a certain collection or not. And basically, by holding these things, by holding these inscriptions, the promise from these collections is that you're now going to get that collection's runes when that launches, which will happen on the halving. So, yeah, that's a lot.
And why are people super pumped about this more than, like, I feel like it's taking away from like the original set of ordinals folks, but maybe I'm misinterpreting.
Yeah, I mean, it's connected to ordinals, but also not. It's not. It doesn't use the same. It doesn't use ordinal theory at all to sort of track balances of runes and things like that. It doesn't. It doesn't put its data in the witness data like inscriptions do. So it's much more simple. It's sort of designed as a response to these other protocols, which do operate on, the Ordinals protocol, like BRC20 and kind of all the BRC20 derivatives that are out there that store their data in like JSON, and they're sort of one-time use inscriptions. Every time that you need to transfer an inscription to somebody, you need to create a new inscription and transfer that new inscription to somebody. So it gets really messy. It's very inefficient. So Runes is sort of a response to that to make it UTXO based. So if I have a rune and I send it to somebody, I'm not sort of wasting UTXOs or kind of clogging up the UTXO set on Bitcoin. And it stores its data in OpReturn as well. So it's super small in terms of its data size, which will make it a lot easier and cheaper to sort of interact with. But I think, I personally think like there's so much hype kind of going into it. I think it was last week, Charlie from Ordinal Hub posted this article, and all of these inscriptions sort of that are like kind of pre-mining runes, it accounts for already over like $500 million worth of like market cap is like going into these already. So there's already a ton of money and a ton of people that seem to be very interested in this protocol, and it hasn't even launched yet. So, the countdown is on. Right, we're less than a month away to the halving now, which is definitely something else I wanted to talk about. Just the halving in general. There's so many things that are happening for the halving. So it seems like it might happen on 420. What do you think, Rena?
419, it's gonna move. It's moving up. Bitcoin is just like ready for this. They're like, we don't have time to waste. We're ready to have. And so I think 419 from like the latest block counter. What I'm kind of curious about is how this halving cycle will differ from every other halving cycle previously, because this is the first time we have a Bitcoin ETF. So institutional demand and inflows are outpacing the supply of current Bitcoin in circulation. Mm-hmm. And we're going to have a lower block reward, so less Bitcoin entering the market on a day, less new Bitcoin entering the market on a day. I think we're going to go down to only like 450 new Bitcoin per day. However, asset managers can't keep up with the demand. So I think it's going to create a very different volatility cycle with some downward selling pressure that we haven't seen.
Yeah, it's basically it's a supply shock and a demand shock all in the same year. So quite the setup. And I remember seeing a few weeks ago now some article about how OTC desks like had like no Bitcoin left, and I don't know how like accurate that was because they can always get Bitcoin, right? But it seems like the supply definitely is not, doesn't seem to be enough to satisfy the demand that has been happening lately, especially with ETFs.
Well, I think you have to think about how many corporations and individuals are holding Bitcoin on their balance sheet or for their personal, let's call it vault or philosophy, and that Bitcoin is not entering the market supply. And so when these ETF providers like the BlackRocks of the world are looking for new Bitcoin, because OTC desks don't have enough, they actually have to go on market and buy. So imagine being like ETF internet BlackRock and going, damn, looks like I need to go in Coinbase and put in some market orders just to get enough to hit my ETF demand.
Yeah, it's definitely quite the setup. I think one thing though with like the public companies and stuff buying Bitcoin is the floodgates are open, right? But we haven't really seen a lot of new companies come in yet. And I don't really know, I guess why that is. We had like obviously MicroStrategy has a ton. Tesla has like some that they've been kind of holding on to, but not a lot of other big companies have really come in yet.
I actually think a lot of like pension funds added Bitcoin secretly to their like portfolios over the past Bitcoin and ETH over the past 6-7 years quietly. Um, I remember reading articles here and there about different like national government pension funds as well as state and then even police departments, different universities. So I do think like there's been slow growth over the years, but the ETF thing definitely blew it out of the water.
I'll give you something funny, but I think some of you guys know that I live in Houston, and the Firefighters Relief Pension Fund of Houston has Bitcoin.
That's awesome.
Yeah, that is pretty amazing.
There are a lot that actually have Bitcoin, but they're quiet about it. The one that I love to like reference who has Bitcoin is the Japanese like national pension fund that goes to all of their agricultural farmers. Their pension is in Bitcoin.
And that's like one of the largest ones, right? Am I recalling that correctly? Like in the world?
Yeah, it's like $1.4 trillion equivalent, that pension fund. But they do have a position in Bitcoin. They have some other assets like gold and such like that. But I think it's only a matter of time. A lot of funds, because of their structure, can't sometimes directly hold an asset, which is why they're going to have to participate via ETFs. Actually, the better way to look at it is how many actually have GBTC to start.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Do you see? I mean, I think on the retail side, people are maybe more cognizant of that. Like, especially if you had like if you were holding GBTC in something like a Roth account, right, where it's really easy to kind of switch out of that without getting a huge hit on your taxes and switching to something with less fees. Are kind of these larger pensions and stuff, kind of also very mindful of that.
Yeah, because it's just more about like what the restrictions you are. If you're a registered investment advisor, an RIA, there are some basically for like a crash course of like series law. You have to have a different series license for every type of asset that you can sell on behalf of the customer. So like traditional traders have to have like a series 63 and a 7 to be able to sell these types of debt or equity instruments. Bitcoin as a commodity requires a different series license for folks to offer that to their end clientele. And so because GBTC is on the equity side, historically it's been easier to be offered for a variety of programs. ETFs will be kind of falling in the same boat, but holding a direct asset, there are kind of a lot of restrictions for like qualified custodian, at least in America. Other countries are different.
Yeah, I've heard that there's sort of different classifications of assets in terms of like what can be marketed, especially in the US. Like something can be solicited actively, like they can do active marketing and be like, hey, we recommend that you buy GBTC. Or it can be like only kind of on a if the client asks basis. Like if the client asks that they'd like to buy it, then they can offer it, but otherwise it's not going to come up in discussion. Or they can just like straight out not offer it at all, like what Vanguard has been doing.
Well, Vanguard can just suck it.
That's a fair take. That's a fair take. I appreciate that. Yeah, I mean, we've talked about this before, Rena. I think just in ETFs in general, like is obviously having more people having the option for more people to get exposure to Bitcoin is a good thing. But that Bitcoin is just going to sit there, right? And it's going to be not productive. And hopefully it is kind of more of an educational thing where once more of these Bitcoin primitives come out, more of these apps that are really you know interesting and useful continue to come out on Bitcoin. You're not going to be able to do anything with that if you have it in an ETF, right?
Nope. If you participate in an ETF, you can say, thank you, BlackRock. I just gave you some Bitcoin to hold forever and I'm never going to touch it. So, like, I love that ETFs increase mass market appeal and awareness of Bitcoin, that it deserves to be its own asset class. But I worry about how much Bitcoin essentially will be held in cold storage and never be able to use. So, like, think about the more and more Bitcoin that goes into BlackRock or another asset manager means the less available Bitcoin will maybe be used for ordinals or something else because the supply is effectively taken out of the market. But on the flip side, it means that if you're a retail person, the Bitcoin that you have might be perceived as more value because yours is liquid and in the market. You can actually use it and deploy it. So it might cause actually price appreciation, but it's a catch 22.
Yeah, it's almost like it's like an arbitrage versus like Bitcoin in an ETF versus like open Bitcoin that you could do whatever you want with. That's interesting. Yeah, I wonder if they'll like in the future come out with a mechanism that will allow you to sort of convert from, ETF and actually like withdraw your Bitcoin to your own wallet in the future.
I mean, at that point, it's like you just used an ETF on the on ramp for like the purchasing power, but then you're going to end up going to self custody, which, in this situation, retail has been doing it from the start.
Yeah, I mean something like that would be potentially interesting because you then, I mean, maybe not the people here would be interested in it, but like for the average like retail person that is not tech savvy and like not very good with managing their own keys or anything like that, like maybe that would be a good thing to have the ability to kind of switch back and forth. And that would you wouldn't then need like multi-sig custody solutions or anything like that you might handle on your own. You could just kind of rely on like BlackRock to handle that for you when you want to like hold it for a while.
Yeah, but I think like within the next 6 to 8 months. Okay, I'm going to give it a year before we start to see less user friction on the retail onboarding side. And I think like some of these retail apps, ideally leather wallet, putting a plug out for leather, um, will just be so frictionless and scale, and that'll help scale, you know, and compete with some of these like BlackRocks and stuff like that. I think BlackRock is like, I bet you some whales have, do you think some of the whales have decided to like use like these ETFs for security purposes? Or do you think they're all like staying in self custody?
No, I think they'd be in like other custody. Like if I was a whale, like I had hundreds and hundreds of Bitcoin and I did not want to do my private key management myself, but I truly believed in Bitcoin, I would have done something where it's like a pseudo setup of like multi-sig, which between like my own custody and something like Casa, where you have like the key storage. That's what I would do if I was a whale, or I would probably think, damn, I wonder which custodian is regulated and has a less of a shot of going down. If that was the case, I'd look at the Coinbases or the Anchorages or those of the world and set up custody.
Yeah, I think it goes back to the fees though, right? Because these, like you mentioned, Casa and like Unchained, and there's like other solutions out there that are obviously they're providing a valuable service, but like these ETFs, the fees on them are in comparison a lot
They're,
smaller.
yeah, well, ETFs will have like a fee rebate right now, but at one point in time, they're going to have to turn fees to like the proper fee rate, which they usually charge. It's just incentivizing for short-term promo right now.
Yeah.
Which is largely driving up like the Bitcoin rally that we see right now, or have seen over the last couple of weeks. It is subsidized by ETFs.
Yeah, maybe not over the last few days, but definitely over the last few weeks, we've definitely been seeing that. I just brought up Moonmath. Moonmath requested to come up. Moonmath, did you have anything to add to the ETF conversation, or did you have something else you wanted to chat about?
Yeah. Can you guys hear me okay?
Yeah.
So I was wondering if you could play around with the idea. So like Bitcoin at its one of the key things is it's an anti-censorship technology. So the idea like anyone can come to this and use this network to be able to transact financially. And like it's attracted a really broad range of people with different interests and purposes for Bitcoin. So like the ETF is sort of like the latest, most interesting one. I think it's interesting to think of like previously the group of people who would use ETFs could not have a voice. They did not have access. They were sort of censored away from Bitcoin because they didn't have access. Have you thought about like how do you think like how do you square the like, well, maybe we don't want to have ETFs, but Bitcoin is anti-censorship? Like I'm not sure how to like square that thought.
Yeah, that is a good point. Like for me personally, like most of my Bitcoin is self-custodied. But just because of the tax benefits, like I do also have some Bitcoin like in my 401k. But yeah, I mean, certainly because it's not self-custody, you absolutely run into like, I mean, for one, you can't do anything, really with it. You can't like send it to somebody like you can if it's self-custodied, but you can certainly, have your assets seized a lot easier, right? If it's not in self-custody. And there's all sorts of, other, there's less counterparty risk with like a huge institution than you might have with something like a BlockFi or a Celsius. But there's still that.
I think my question was going in a slightly, I mean, that's interesting what you just said, but I think I was going in a slightly different direction with it. Sort of what I'm thinking about is I'm thinking about the use of Bitcoin or storing value in Bitcoin is like voting with your feet, right? Like when you use Bitcoin, you're expressing that you want to store value in Bitcoin instead of storing value in your fiat currency or in your home or something like that. So like the expression, the speech that you're exercising is like your freedom to leave the fiat system. And the ETFs, I think, have opened up a lot of people to express that opinion.
Yeah, I think it kind of goes back a little bit to my point of like the educational side of things, right? Like by, you learn Bitcoin best by sort of holding it. So for the new people that are coming in, maybe they're, they don't have any self-custody Bitcoin and they're just getting exposure to Bitcoin first by buying like an ETF. And then from there, go ahead, Rena.
Do you think that's like almost counterintuitive because they are basically coming into Bitcoin, to Boonmouth's point, on the you're supposed to be coming in typically for like the freedom of I'm leaving fiat world, but the irony is that they're coming through like the most traditional of fiat rails to get into Bitcoin. So like how do you make the flip?
Yeah, I mean the flip wouldn't be easy because there's no way to exit without then selling your Bitcoin and then going and buying it elsewhere, right? There's no like we were talking about. There's that ability to transfer between completely locked up in a self-custody ETF to self-custody is
But I mean, like when you sell the ETF, the Bitcoin does it's not like it stays at the ETF. That Bitcoin ends up, if enough people sell it, ends up in a tranche that then goes somewhere else, probably to another ETF most likely. But like if all the ETFs were distributing their Bitcoins, you'd end up with large tranches ending up on the open market. So
Yeah.
like, so when you sell it on the ETF and then you buy it from Coinbase and then transfer it to your self-custody wallet, like that is you effectively have made a transaction where you've moved the value from the ETF to your self-custody. So like it does, like you can, like in a sense you get that direct exposure. I think like the Bitcoin that's quote unquote locked up in the ETFs, it's not actually locked up. Like that, all of that could theoretically end up back on the open market.
It can reflow back into free
Mhm.
market, but
Yeah.
it will have some like volatility movements if you go that direction. Because what if couple 100 billion was being on that selling tranche? Then you're going to have pretty volatile effects for the Bitcoin market on open.
Yeah, I mean, and that's, I mean, so then earlier you were discussing, I thought this was interesting. You had brought up the point that that we end up with these Bitcoins that end up on the ETF forever, and that also is true at the same time. Like, I know it sounds like I'm contradicting myself, but I'm trying to express it like, yeah, some of these Bitcoins will probably like sit in a cold wallet with these ETFs forever and they'll never leave the ETF because the ETFs will always maintain that value. I think that is also like both things are true at the same time.
Yeah, because certain.
Go ahead, Brandon.
Well, I was just gonna say, yeah, because like certain pensions and certain funds, you know, might have their policies in place where they can't sell, you know, certain things. So then in that case, that Bitcoin would be locked up for, you know, in certain cases, no matter what.
I was going to go off on a tangent of, do we actually think there's going to be a premium of non-ETF Bitcoin in the way that people are looking at rare sats? Meaning my self-custody Bitcoin might trade at a higher premium or a slight premium because it's self-custodied and it can go directly in market, and I don't have ETF lockup restrictions because I'm BlackRock.
I think that's an interesting question. I've tried to figure out how to model that recently, actually. So I created the Moonmath website. And I've been thinking about how to do updates. And what you're talking about is one of the things I've been thinking about how to model. So like, and it, like you can get some of these data. Like if you get an account with Glassnode, you can get pretty specific. But like you can model that mathematically, like where we're at now versus like how long it would take to get to that point where the ETFs consume, like have the majority of the Bitcoin and we're operating independently. Like right now we're looking at ETFs having combined like 700,000 Bitcoin. I can't remember what it is off the top of my head, but it's 600,000 to 700,000, something like that. And we get, but like how many can they actually acquire? There's maybe there's 2.1 million Bitcoin available on exchanges, and that number's dropping.
It's dwindling, and then there's I know which Glassnode. I think it was like a Glassnode and River report that you might be referencing. But yeah, actually, what was even more surprising in all of that was how much Bitcoin is deemed lost. I think they noted like 2 million Bitcoin is deemed lost and unaccounted.
We know for sure 2 million. It could be as much as 5.
Yeah. And an ETF right now is about like 3% of the Bitcoin supply.
So yes, we could end up in that world where ETFs dominate, or like the traditional financial world dominates control of all Bitcoin. I think it would take a lot.
I think it would take a lot too.
Yeah, we would be in a pretty crazy place. Like that's going to take a long time. It would take a lot, but I don't think it's like outside of the realm of concern. Like, what if we ended up in this world where Bitcoin actually is the backbone of global money? Like, so there's the power law people, and the power law people are saying that Bitcoin's going up the price of Bitcoin is going up at the rate of basically at the rate of Metcalfe's law. Well, like the square of Metcalfe's law is the increase of hash rate, and the hash rate is the square root of the price. And the hash rate is actually a better power law than the dollar value of Bitcoin. So I think it's it's like 2 to the 6 or something like that. So I mean, yes, we can end up in that place where like the price continues up at that exponential rate, and it's worth so much that the only people who can be affecting the price of Bitcoin are those core organizations, and probably around that time, like OGs will have retired and sold all their Bitcoins. They like that timing kind of overlaps.
It's interesting that you bring up like the hash rate argument, because now it's kind of getting me to think of we're about to have, it's going to be more hash power required to continue to mine. Sooner or later it will be at the point that there is no more mining. I know it's like 50, 100 years out, but theoretically, if you like were to abstract that, really in like 10 years, it actually makes no more sense to continue the hash power of mining. How would you account for that in kind of your thesis if the hash rate is more impactful?
I think if you model the increase in fees, that makes up for the missing hash rate. So like Bitcoin will continue to double its efficiency, but the hash rate will continue to increase. And what'll support that, like as the payouts to miners decrease, what will increase is how much they make off of fees.
But
Which
when
is
you
one of the
have
reasons that we want to like maintain the competition on the block space, is that we keep those fees up so that the miners in the future have incentive to mine.
But if more and more Bitcoin moves into ETF custody, we'll have less of a fee cycle because you just don't have as many people transacting.
We'll always fill the blocks. We will always fill the blocks. So there will always be competition for the blocks. When you say people,
true.
it's like, so like the number of people who have wallets is increasing, and that's increasing at half of Metcalfe's law. But the value of the network is increasing at Metcalfe's law. So we're doubling wallets every 4 years, and we're doubling the value of the network every 2 years. It's like, that's back of the napkin numbers, but it's basically like that. So like when you're increasing at these rates, it's like the window for error on all of these things is like massive. So like being off by an order of magnitude actually isn't being that far off. So it's hard to say yes or no right now because it's too far off in the future.
All I can feel is like these ETFs are eventually going to fuck with us. I'm not going to lie.
I'm not sure what to think about it, but the number of users is still increasing. It's not increasing as fast as the number of miners and full nodes, but those are also increasing. Users are definitely so you're going to have more participants on the network, but the number of transactions that can fit into a block will not increase too terribly much. I mean, I guess we'll get second and third layers, and then there'll be like currencies that are based off of Bitcoin, where like the value is held in that second layer, but it's like denominated. It's like a share of the Bitcoin. So like you have like, nation state currencies where they're like a Bitcoin-backed currency, but it's all a digital stable currency based off of a share of like the nation state's trove of Bitcoin, like how the dollar used to be, like how all money used to be. And well, not all money, but like pre-20th century. So like all kinds of weird stuff is going to happen, and Bitcoin, like the size of just because a transaction doesn't happen on the Bitcoin layer doesn't mean that it's not a Bitcoin transaction, because it's going to be, as long as it's not rehypothecated, it's still Bitcoin, I guess. The rehypothecated is a big dumb word. Do I need to explain? Should we talk about what is rehypothecation? I don't think anyone cares. Anyway, I think it's hard to say how many transactions there actually are.
Yeah, that's true. I always think about when you just have less supply available, if anything, the transaction will be more valuable. So I see that the fees will increase in that regard, but I worry that the throughput of number of transactions may be low.
I mean, I think it'll be like, yeah, the throughput of the number of the transactions. It's hard to say what we'll do with the block size in the future. Maybe they'll decide that like it's okay to increase the block size and allow more transactions through, and we'll just scale directly on chain and store all that. But like we've seen that play out, and it increases centralization. So I tend towards conservatism to say, it's bad to mess with the original thing. We should just leave it the way it is because change is bad when you're dealing with something like money. Like just leave it the way it is, and then allow complex layers of abstraction around the outside of it. But like leave the core thing the way it is and don't mess with it. So we'll probably I think we will always see full blocks within like 99.9% of the time we will always see full blocks. So like the number of transactions that Bitcoin does will stay relatively constant. And then what will happen is that there'll be an increase in competition, but like the competition will be variable, as we've observed with the size of the mempool and the cost of and the cost per UTXO.
Yeah, I think as we get to more like scaling solutions and roll ups and things like that happening on Bitcoin, those blocks could potentially just be a few really big roll ups, right, from different L2s out there, or, things like that. I wanted to mention, I just brought up Bugsy, got his hand raised. Block City, did you have? I brought you up before, but I wanted to give you a chance if you had something to add, or
Yep. Thank you for having me. Can you hear me clear?
Bugsy, we'll get to you in a sec, but yeah, we can hear you.
Yeah, I was just going to add to the conversation of the ETF. I have a banking background. I work on the Wall Street. The thing is, with these ETFs, we are seeing more of institutions come in, as we see in the news, and probably less of retail. But the point that I want to make is when these institutions are actually buying Bitcoins, which is what is happening since it got launched, these are higher people like sitting right at the top. They make real long-term decisions. They see that the inflation is cutting in, their profits are going down, time is hard, we're probably getting into a recession more or not. But they have their eyes are more on, we're doing this for multi-year approach where we buy Bitcoin now and then we're going to get the benefit of it. So just to settle that point, that if we think that these institutions are going to flip like as soon as halving is over or as soon as it touches 100k or 200k, a lot of institutions are not going to do that because they are looking at the long-term picture. So I just wanted to make that point. That's what I see, how these people are playing it, like really long term.
Yeah, that's a good point. And there's also just a lot of bureaucracy that's included in that, right? Like the decisions to allocate into something like Bitcoin for a large corporation could take years. So to immediately flip, if once the price goes down for a few weeks, I mean, that's just not something that they would react to that quickly. Bugsy.
Hey, what's going on, guys?
What's up, man?
Not much. No, just wanted to kind of have the other side of the argument with Moonmath regarding the Bitcoin payment off chain, right? If we're relying on L2s and L3s, I think obviously that's a trade-off we're going to be willing to make in the future. But I think it's important to realize that those are not final settlement, right? Like those can be double spent. Even a Lightning channel is not.
100%. I agree with you.
Yeah.
I agree with you so much. I think that's the most interesting part of that conversation, actually. Yeah. Talk more about that, please.
Yeah, no, all good. No, I just, I guess I was just coming up to say, yeah, like, I don't consider my Bitcoin in my own custody until it is finally settled to chain. So we can, use side chains, use L2s, things with certain trade-offs that we're willing to accept. But at the end of the day, until that massive batch transaction gives me my UTXO with my Bitcoin, there are trade-offs that I will have to accept, and I don't believe that it's a 100% Bitcoin transaction, but it can represent a lot of Bitcoin transactions 100%, and you can basically have maybe a small amount that you deposit into a side chain, do all your small payments, pay for your coffee, all that, and then when you're finally ready to settle back to L1, you have the ability to do so. That's all I was just kind of pointing out.
Yeah, I think that like the concern that was brought up earlier, I don't want to mispronounce her name. Can you say her name for me so I don't mispronounce it?
Rena.
Rena was making some really good points earlier about like the concern of the number of transactions going down. And you're bringing up a really good point of, well, yeah, I want to see my transactions actually settle on the core chain. Like I want to see the block where my retirement account was settled in like from Bitcoin to cash or from cash to Bitcoin, or like I want to see the blocks. I want to actually see the transactions that transfer the value into my 401k that's holding the Bitcoin. Like I want to see evidence of that. And
Yeah.
we're not there yet, and I think we should be. Like that, I feel like I'm owed that. If the ETFs are going to participate in this system, I feel like they owe me.
They owe
me
you a
proof.
transaction.
Yeah, and that I think is I think that there are two ETFs that I think are like your best case. Like most likely it will happen there if it happens in the near future, and it's Bitwise and FBTC. I don't think anybody else would do it.
Yeah, I'm going to be honest. I think, like in the future, right? There's going to be a phase where it's and then they fight you, right? I don't know if you've heard that before, but I'm not so convinced that ETFs may allow that in the future, due to government regulations and things like that. I'm a big self-custody advocate, and I think self-custody is the only way for you to actually own your Bitcoin in any meaningful way, right? The first sentence of the Bitcoin white paper is literally talking about, a peer-to-peer system without a financial institution. And we are reintroducing that with ETFs. So if you're here for, number go up and you want to, make some fiat gains, and that's all you're here for, that's totally fine. That's your prerogative. And an ETF may serve you best for that purpose. But I think there's other vehicles that are much more important, especially in the custody realm, and having that safely stored in your own custody is extremely important. And I just don't think people realize that right now with these ETFs, that they're giving up their custody, and these ETFs don't really owe you anything, right? You're giving them full control over your money, and they have their terms of service, and they're going to do what they want, right? So just important to point those things out. And I'm not saying don't buy them or whatever, right? Everyone has their own thing that they want to do, or their own prerogatives, like I said. But you are risking, or you are accepting specific trade-offs that may not be very, they're not really like shown to you directly, right? They're not telling you, hey, well, you have to ask us for permission now to spend your own money, right? With self-custody, I can spend millions, billions of dollars with a click of a button for less than $1, maybe $2, and that's very powerful. And I think we're slowly, getting away from that, unfortunately.
I think it goes back to what we were talking about a little bit earlier. Bitcoin is more than money. It's more than an asset, but it is like your personal freedom to embark on whatever path you want to take.
Absolutely. And
I think everybody wants to just everyone wants to bounce their last check, and everyone wants to die happy, and everyone wants to have good relationships, and they want to they want to everyone basically wants the same thing. They want their money to be boring. They want their transactions to go through. They don't want to screw anyone, and they don't want to be screwed. Right? We don't want to commit crimes against anybody, and we don't want anyone to commit a crime against us. Like we all want a life that is of as little consequence as possible when it comes down to it. Like just don't mess with my vibe, basically. That's
sure.
I think that's 90. That's unless there's if you want more than that, I think you got to talk to a therapist, right? Or you're young and you don't know yet that you don't get to expect a lot. So I want Bitcoin to be boring as soon as possible, but I still want there to be proof that what I have has value. And I think the thing that I'm upset about, and the reason that we need Bitcoin, is that there's no evidence. Like I said, rehypothecation in terms of Bitcoin, where we've actually seen rehypothecation that really upsets me is in gold. Caitlin Long. Everyone knows who Caitlin Long is, I hope. Caitlin Long, she wrote this really great paper 8 years ago or something about the rehypothecation in gold markets. And basically what happened in gold markets is that, like, everybody went in and said, okay, there's a fixed supply of gold, and these gold ETFs have like a certain value to them. And then we're going to take this gold, and then we're going to like leverage against it. And then they leverage against it again, and then banks lever against it. And we end up having somewhere between 10 and 100 times more gold in our financial system than there actually is gold in existence, because of all of these financial instruments that have levered up against gold. And they lever up against it over and over again. So like everyone taking these excessive claims. It's sort of like what people are worried about with like Trump's properties. Well, how does he get $500 million? Well, especially when he's like got God knows how many loans against those properties already, like the whole thing is a house of cards that comes tumbling down. Well, that's the concern. That's also a concern with rehypothecation in gold. So like when we look at the gold market, or we say, okay, gold is worth 10, 12 trillion. Well, it's worth 10, 12 trillion under these terms of like gold being wildly rehypothecated. But like as soon as you take the speculative value away from gold, and people are like, there's a whole bunch of gold that just sits unused in the world and it's not being used as store of value, the value of gold drops dramatically down to its utility value, which is like not very much. And that's, you know, like, and it's the same thing with like houses, right? Why is property so expensive? Why is housing so expensive? It's because we've turned it into our store of value. And all of this stuff is just speculative bullshit, and it's like stealing money from people who just don't want to be fucked with.
We're gonna get speculative bullshit on Bitcoin too, right?
Layers.
We're gonna get it, right? There's gonna be an L3 with
absolutely
with eCash, where you deposit Bitcoin and you get a token, and that's worth a specific amount of Bitcoin, you know, compared to the Bitcoin in the holding, you know, wallet, right? We're already seeing things like that, so it's going to exist forever, and people love to loan against and make money on their whatever money that they're using, right? So yeah, I think those boom and bust cycles will be more apparent because everything can be verified on chain rather than trying to verify in like Fort Knox, which likely doesn't have any actual gold in it. It's really hard to verify. So Bitcoin kind of solves that issue. But yeah, there's going to be boom and bust cycles, and people are going to try and rehypothecate Bitcoin, but they will likely be caught with their pants down. But yeah, like the big overwhelming thing here is that unless it's on L1, it is not final settlement to Bitcoin. And you can make Bitcoin transactions on L2s and L3s, and you can do that. And some people will have to accept that trade-off because they're not able to afford an L1 transaction in the future. I know it sounds crazy, but 8 billion people cannot transact on L1. It's not possible, at least today. The throughput's just not possible. So like UTXO sharing through Lightning channels and potentially Covenant things and vaults will be very important. But yeah, if it's not on chain, there is a trade-off and a risk that your funds could be rugged. So
I mean, so right now we have like one Lightning network, right? And there's like a certain amount of Bitcoin that exists on that one Lightning network. There can be like millions of Lightning networks. There doesn't just have to be one Lightning network. So like there's one Lightning network where we just are like, okay, this is the Lightning network, and we think of it as like the global Lightning network. But there can be another network that's like someone said they're from Houston, like City of Houston Lightning network, and like that Lightning network is the Lightning network for the city of Houston, and like all the people who live in Houston like operate with Houston money on the Houston Lightning Network. And when you move to Houston, you send your Bitcoins into the Houston Lightning Network, and now you're able to transact in Houston.
Yeah, that's basically like the Fedimint model.
Yeah,
right.
That's more Fedimint.
Yeah.
So like when we're talking about like layer two, like we could, like if we take that approach to it, we could just be like, okay, like layer 2 and scales to infinity. We don't need a layer 3. We can just do everything with layer 2 because like we have these regional Lightning networks or whatever it is.
Well, not exactly. Lightning is actually still throughput.
Well, it is throughput to the base layer. Yeah, you're right.
So like, yeah, it's not infinite. That's why Fedimint and each eCash is becoming a thing, right? You'd have a
Right.
Lightning channel. Basically, Lightning is like kind of like the, say you have all these little eCash, yeah, like Capitals, Texas or whatever has their own eCash. But if you want to transfer to Florida eCash, you would use the Lightning network and to do that, to go into their, their local eCash rather than the Texas one. So that's kind of what the infrastructure is being built around right now, which is really cool. But yeah, no, Lightning still has throughput restrictions, and there is actually multiple types of Lightning networks that exist today. It's not just one. There's multiple already.
I wanted to just add on to the conversation of the gold that we were having. If you guys just want to step a little back in history, if you remember in the 1800s when the US was on the gold standard, there was a problem, right? They were, like we mentioned, they were printing more than what they had, but then their spend budget was so high that they couldn't back it up. So at some point they said we are going to detach or unpeg the dollar with the gold. So that was the decision made by the president by passing an executive order, and then they started printing money based on whatever the model is. And the reason I'm bringing this up is this kind of correlates to what is happening right now, and this is where we need to ask, what is your real plan B? So when all these bitcoins are going in ETFs like BlackRock and all these organizations are eating it up, they're holding on to it. Now, can we expect an executive order in the future which will cause these so-called regulated APs to take over that collateral that is sitting in these regulated banks, and then tell the people that if you own it, you'll just get the value at which you bought it. We'll give you that money back, and then this belongs to the government now. Why? Because that's the time where all the other nation states are going to buy it, and the shortest path for them is to take over all these ETFs. So this is a plausible scenario that everyone needs to keep in mind, because this has happened 100 years ago. So it's important everyone knows about this.
It's a likely scenario, yes, but at the same time, I would be careful with the fear mongering here, because we have the ability right now to self custody and to own our own Bitcoin. So instead of saying, well, in the future they're going to confiscate it from you, you should be maybe educating people and saying, hey, you should probably not be buying these ETFs, and you should probably be buying the underlying asset before it's too late, right? There are ways to mitigate these things if you just act now instead of buying this ETF, right? That's 100% a possibility, but they don't control Bitcoin or anything like that. They would just, they would just have a large amount for sure, 100%.
Yeah, no, I agree. I agree everyone should self custody it. But the second point that I wanted to get into is, as BlackRock recently announced, they're going to tokenize assets. You guys all have heard the news. Now, if we were to go 5, 10 years ahead from now, what it would be like is BlackRock is trying to issue all kinds of financial packages, just like what happened, in the last recession, all these mortgage backed applications, financial products. Today all of these are just running on printed money or leverage, but tomorrow it's going to migrate to a new standard, which is all this Bitcoin that they're holding on to will be the collateral, and then they'll build all these products on top. But the main thing is, when they try to transact, they can't settle on L1, which is the same conversation we just had a few minutes back. All that traffic cannot settle on L1. The applications will be slow or won't work. So they're going to find eventually something that works, and probably they're going to start with Coinbase base layer. See, it is probably going to have issues. They'll probably take up Ethereum. They'll probably take everything, try everything out. But I believe the main thesis is that at some point people will realize that whatever you pick doesn't have Bitcoin finality in the transactions. So it can be reversed, it can be attacked. A lot of attack vectors are possible until we narrow down to stacks, which is with the Nakamoto release is going to actually do the magic, and everyone slowly realizes, yes, this is the actual solution we should have been on.
Has anyone looked at the size of the average Bitcoin transaction recently? I'm gonna go look up that data, but I think that speaks to what you're talking about. Where like there's going to be like a size of Bitcoin transaction that we're trending to, and like because of block size competition and because of the number of wallets that are active and actually transacting in Bitcoin is increasing, like we have an S curve, right, that will approach where the number of transactions that we have is pretty well balanced with the average size of the transaction, which is pretty well balanced with the cost of the transaction. Any questions so far? That was a mouthful. Okay, I'm gonna keep going. So
Okay.
like if we're headed in that direction, I think we'll probably end up in this place where, like, let's say that it's like a half Bitcoin up, right? Like you don't see you don't see Bitcoin transactions that are less than a half a Bitcoin. It's got to be substantially lower than that right now. But sometime in the future, we'll say fees are so high that no reasonable person would transact with less than half of a Bitcoin, because the settlement fee, like to settle on chain, it would just like cost too much. Well, if a Bitcoin is like $1 million, that means you're saying the only time we do Bitcoin transactions are like when someone's buying a house or like finalizing their retirement. Like maybe they would do a couple Bitcoin transactions their entire life, but probably it wouldn't be people doing Bitcoin transactions. It would be like you would be like settling oil contracts between nation states.
So what about in rather than the settlement, like more of the onboarding, right? Because to enter, into the L2s, you kind of usually come from the L1. Maybe we'll have, solutions where you enter directly into an L2, but that kind of opens up a really interesting,
You can already do that.
Yeah.
You can already do that. You can pay someone fiat and they'll send you Lightning into a
Of course, yeah, we have like Strike and other options for that.
Yeah, and that's probably what the future will be, right? Again, you can't scale to 8 billion people, but like saying the transaction over $500,000 or whatever, that might equate to 1,000 small transactions that they are batching together to save on fees, things like that. But I know you're familiar with that.
That's exactly right. And the ETFs are actually, to keep it on topic, the ETFs are an example of doing that, right? Because they're doing Bitcoin transactions in these large tranches and they're sending large amounts of Bitcoin around, but they're representing a large number of smaller transactions into people's retirement accounts.
Yep. Yeah, I would just pointing out to Block City's point about stacks. I'm not going to FUD any project. I'm not really a huge fan of stacks, but if it's not on the Bitcoin blockchain and it's using another blockchain, that might be a solution and a trade-off that you're willing to accept. But again, it is similar to all L2s in the fact that if it's not on L1, there is a trade-off and a risk and potentially someone that you're asking permission to spend your money. Right? Like those things don't just go away with an upgrade to a sidechain, right? We should have hundreds of options for L2s, right? There's no one L2 that should be the bread and butter. We should have multiple options. So if that one is an option for people, that's great. There is Lightning, there is the L3 Fedis, things like that. Those all need to branch out so that the throughput can become bigger. And I don't think advocating for one specific one should be the goal. I think we should be advocating for all of them. And if those trade-offs are something you're willing to accept, then that's great.
Yeah, no, I agree. The market is open. I mean, everyone's welcome to innovate. And one of the key things that I only noticed with the Nakamoto release is I think the theme there was when users enter the L2, they don't need to hold the Stacks token, which is really good UX, because you don't need to know there is a native token. You just come with your Bitcoins, pegs into SBDC, you participate in DeFi, and then you leave. And nobody touches your Bitcoin. It's all decentralized. So that's the part that I liked, and I would like to see similar features in other L2s. And I think, yes, the market is open for everyone.
Absolutely. Anyway, thanks guys. I appreciate it. I'm just going to hop down now, but thanks for having the discussion with me.
Yeah, thanks, Bugsy. I think that's actually probably a good place to end it. I think going back to kind of our ethos at Trust Machines, right? When especially talking about stacks, a lot of people think that we have a really big bias towards stacks because obviously our CEO is Maniv, he co-founded Stacks, et cetera. But we definitely share that mindset of we're open to all L2s, I don't think it's a one L2 satisfies every requirement or every need or whatever, right? There's definitely going to be special purpose L2s, and we're excited to to support those, and hey, going back to the show title, right? They're all good for Bitcoin. So yeah, I want to thank Rena and Shaylee had to drop already. Definitely thank them for coming on, and Moonmath, Block City, Bugsy. Thank you guys so much for coming up and joining us. I want to give one last shout out to our console channel, which is Club Bitcoin. I pinned it at the top. If anybody wants to continue the conversation there, please feel free. That is powered by our app Console, which you can log in with an email if you like, but you can also just log in with a Bitcoin wallet and get started. So would love to see you guys there. We're thinking of potentially doing some giveaways soon. So that's your alpha to go ahead and join, and maybe look forward to some giveaways in the next week or two. But yeah, until next time, again, we'll do this every week, every Friday, just to kind of end the week, recap some Bitcoin news. And yeah, thank you guys all so much for joining us. See you next time.
Thank you for listening. We record Good for Bitcoin live every Friday at 2 p.m. Eastern Time on X. Please follow us at Trust Machines Co. if you would like to listen and engage with us live. Visit us at trustmachines.co for all the latest Bitcoin news. We'll see you next week.